Hello and welcome, friends, to the Perfect Place to Put a Practice podcast. My name is Mike Green. I am the owner of Dr. Demographics, and today we're going to talk about the keys or 5 tips on site selection for specialists. All right. This is a topic that we get this question quite a bit, especially from doctors who are just getting out of school or they're looking at their first practice and trying to decide where they're potentially going to be locating. And they're typically getting a lot of advice from a real estate professional or a well-to-do grandfather or a neighbor or something like that. But they don't really know what to look for when it comes specifically to and how a site might differ for them than what it might for a general practitioner. So I want to give you 5 quick tips this morning that you can consider when you're looking at your potential options when it comes to your practice location. And you may also look at it in comparison for you doctors that are already practicing where you're currently at, and you may find that there's some opportunities there that you're either missing or could probably reevaluate when it comes time to make some changes. So let's look real quickly at these. First, just so you can have an idea of where we're going, we're going to be talking about specifically with specialists, referral networks, patient convenience, growth opportunities, access for the public. We're going to talk about location, and location may be in a different way than what you may be thinking. And then we're going to talk about referrals. And one thing that you need to be aware of is the referral statistics from a general practitioner to a specialist are abysmal. They're embarrassing. They're terrible. And that's major dollars for you as a specialist. It's been studied many times, and the numbers come back somewhere between 40 and 60%, depending on the area and the practice, of how often the patient makes it from a general practitioner to a specialist. So consider this: if you're a GP office and you have a referral card for Dr. X, who's an endodontist, down the road, and you fill out the referral card and you give it to the patient, what is that patient going to do? They're going to take that referral card. They're going to go in get back in their car. They're going to put the card, on their console or on the seat next to them, and it's either going to get lost or it's going to get thrown away or something's going to happen. And oftentimes they don't make it, especially if whatever problem they had is not hurting them anymore. They may not make it to the endodontist. And so again, 40 to 60% don't make it to where they're being referred to. So you need to, as a specialist, control that situation as best as you can. We're going to leave most of that conversation for another day because we're talking more about location, but we do want to talk about referrals and keeping that in mind because it's such a key and important thing for you as a specialist. So tip number 1 is quite simply proximity to your referral sources. Now, depending on the type of specialist you are and how much you're relying on your referrals for your business as opposed to direct marketing, you're going to want to look at that proximity, and really you're going to want to map it out. You're going to look at where are the orthodontists, and are they near the family dentists? Where are the veterinary surgeons, and are they near the general vets? And truly get a map out and see, okay, if I've got a GP on North Main Street, do they have to drive 2 towns over to get to me as a specialist, or am I putting myself in a situation where I'm going to be able to have access to a lot of different general doctors to send me referrals? And so proximity is a big deal, because understand that convenience still for that patient is a huge deal. if you give them two different options for different specialists, and the one further away maybe is a better clinician or whatever, oftentimes that patient will still select the one that's close by, because convenience, especially in a city, is a extremely important factor. And so you've got to look at where you're positioning your practice in a context on a map of where the pin drops are for all the generalists in the area. And really, you've got to look at also not just from the generals, but also, are there other specialties that are going to improve my business? Am I a prosthodontist that might be getting referrals from an oral surgeon, or from maybe even just a medical doctor? I've got to make sure that I am putting my practice in a position where I'm going to be, A, know my network, B, have it mapped really well, and C, have a real close proximity to where all the different specialists are going to be that I'm going to potentially be using as a referral network. So what is your actionable takeaway for tip number one? Is look at your professional directories, look at your local associations, pull up Google Maps if it's as rudimentary as that, and map out where your primary referral sources are going to be at. And I would take it even a step further. If you're looking at a new area, I would pop into some of these offices and see if the ones that are close in proximity to where you're looking to locate your practice, are they willing to refer? Are they the type of practices that are trying to keep everything in-house, or are they sending some of the work out? That's the information you're going to need to know as you're moving forward and closer to that particular office space. So the second tip would be to assess the niche demand in the area. So you want to make sure that there's enough need. And I know this sounds like it would be obvious, but you'd be surprised how often we have a doctor that's looking at a particular area that there's just not the need there. So, for example, if you're an endodontist, we've got to make sure that we have lots of cavities, right? If you're a retina specialist, for example, you've got to make sure that you've got that aging population. Same thing if you're looking to do dentures or prosthodontics or something of that nature. You've got to make sure that you have the right age segment in that area that you're looking at that's going to get there. For vets, super important. We can pull all of the pet numbers for your area, so you've got to make sure and have an absolute awareness of how many pets are in that area, so that you know that your specialty is going to fit in and at what level it's going to fit in for that area. Do you need to be open 6 days a week or only one? Do you need to be there only once a month? I mean, these are all questions that, frankly, are easily answered by doing the data and knowing the statistics for the area in order for you to be successful. But you've got to know it, right? Like, you've got to have done that homework in order to make a good, educated guess. Because, again, your real estate person, they're not going to tell you that in most cases. The seller that of the practice you're going to buy, they're not going to tell you any of this information. They're just going to tell you everything's wonderful. And so it's really important for you to know what the demand is going to be for your particular specialty. Obviously, looking at saturation. Now, I would say, especially in the dental field, that saturation is a really interesting thing, because it used to be that if you were a oral surgeon or an endodontist or an orthodontist, that you could just look for other specialty offices to see what your competition level is. But now that's not the case anymore. So many general offices are offering these treatments and these services within their practice, and more so in some areas of the country than others. And so when you're looking at your saturation, you want to look at which of these doctors are truly going after a very niche down market and only looking at that, and then what other doctors are looking for anything and trying to keep everything in-house. That's really where you've got to look at with your saturation numbers. So, for example, we had a doctor that moved from a really average area in Florida to a spot where the orthodontist had absolutely blown it. And he did really, really well, right? Because he looked at what the saturation was, what the reputation level was for a particular area. And by him moving to that area, he was able to absolutely dominate. And again, one of the ways that you can do that is by looking at that data from a site viability report, like what we provide at Dr. Demographics or others. But that way you'll know exactly what that saturation level is in that particular area that you're looking at. So again, what's your actionable takeaway? Check the industry reports, look at, do surveys of the general practitioners, look for referral gaps. Is there a big cluster of GPs in a certain area and nobody's really servicing them? Are they offering dental implants or braces or something like that because there's no specialists? And so if you were to come in and offer that would actually be an upgrade for them. Those are things you're going to have to find out when you're looking at a particular area that you want to practice in. So the next tip has to do with patient convenience from your different referral providers. And so, we want to look at what is the transition for that person. So if a location really makes it simple for a referred patient to travel, so it's same town, it's just up the road, that's a huge win, right? If you have a specialist that they're not going to be able to get into for a really long time and they're really inconvenient, and that inconvenience can even go down to maybe they're on the 5th floor and the parking is bad and it's hard to get into. If you're a particular type of patient, if you're an older patient, that's a big deal for them. And so you've got to make sure that the transition from where they're being sent to who they're being sent to is very, very easy and very understandable. Now, there's a lot of great resources out there that can help solidify and make sure that your referral makes it from one place to the other. I would really recommend that you use one of those services, because that referral, especially if you're a specialist that relies heavily on referrals, man, you want to control that process as much as possible. Now, I talked about parking and access. So important and very, very much underlooked. When you have, or overlooked rather, when you have especially an older patient and they can see that the parking is not going to be convenient, practice is not easily marked, or it's going to be a journey to get to, the chances of that person walking through the door oftentimes is not that good, especially if they have other options. And so when you're evaluating a particular location that you might want to be practicing in, you've got to really look at what the parking situation is. What is the access? Is there a median in the road? And so people can't, turn left or they have to go down another block to get there. Those are all factors that you should be looking at, and quite frankly, can use as negotiation points if you're looking at nailing down an office. You want to look at, obviously, if you're an orthodontist, if you can be by schools, awesome. If you're a vet, you might want to be by the boarding kennels. If you're a prosthodontist or an endodontist or something like that, there are specific market segments that you want to be attached to so that people can easily find you. And if you do that, that is going to be a huge feather in your cap for people establishing and associating mentally that your office is a XYZ office. And so when you're looking at one of those areas, you got to kind of look at it from the bird's eye view and say, okay, I'm an orthodontist. Here's the schools. Here's the Walmart. Here's the Whole Foods. Here's the H-E-B. Here's all the different things. And where does my practice line up with that? Am I on the road that soccer mom is taking the kids to school? Is she going to see my sign every single day? That's the kind of perfect location that you're looking for. And in every area, you're not going to find it, absolutely. But if you can find a few great options, and this is when your great realtor comes into place, if they can help you find those options, that's going to be where you want to spend your money. Okay, tip number 4. So let's look at budget versus referral ROI. So when you look at the cost considerations, you can really kind of look at if you have a practice that's going to rely a lot on referrals, it's not super important for you to be next to Walmart, right? Like it's not super important for you to be in a really high traffic spot. And as a matter of fact, you might find that you're better suited back in a medical complex that has really great parking, a nice big elevator, all of those things. That might be a better consideration when you look at rent and lease costs. And you'll find that oftentimes those locations are less expensive because they don't have the traffic. Now, if you're a general practitioner, if you're a pediatric dentist, if you're an orthodontist, something of that nature, yes, you need that high traffic. And we talk about that in our other episodes, but that high traffic spot becomes a really sought after area that you can practice in. You want to look towards the future with your growth potential. I don't know how many practices we do reports for on a weekly basis that are simply coming to us because they've run out of room. They've just physically run out of room. They need another operatory, and the closet's not going to cut it. They just need more square footage. And so it's a tricky thing, right? Because you don't want to overbuild, but you certainly don't want to underbuild, especially if you're committed to the area. If you think you're going to be in the area for only, 5 or 10 years, and you build that practice as good as you can, and then potentially sell it, move to something bigger, that is definitely an option. But most of you, I would imagine, you're looking for your home, right? Like you're looking for your place to hang your hat. And so you want to be in a situation where you can grow into your business as it builds. You also want to look at the opportunity for satellites. I was doing a report for a doctor in Atlanta not that long ago, and we got looking at all the different areas around that North Atlanta area that he potentially could put a practice. And when you start looking out at 5 to 15 years, that might be solving your square footage problem, right? That may be solving your specialty niche down service you want to provide. I've got a great doctor partner in North Carolina that's doing that, that's figured out a really good niched product that he wants to provide, but it only makes sense in a couple of different markets. And so as they're looking at expanding, they can look specifically with those eyes of that particular specialty and then select the location based on that. So when you're going and looking at these potential locations, look at it from the sense of, okay, I'm an ambitious doctor. I want to grow this practice, want to grow this brand over the next 10 to 15 years. Am I putting my practice in the place that I'm going to be best positioned for opening up a satellite office down the road? Again, something that you may not be thinking at. Of course, you're trying to just solve problem number one, and I get that. But doctors that think further ahead are the ones that win the game at the end. So the last tip is navigating zoning and facility requirements. This is really an interesting topic and something that really can't be talked about in a format like this, because every area is going to have very specific zoning and particular requirements that they're going to have. Now, depending on how much waste you have, like for example, if it's a surgery type environment, there might be something special that you need to do, but something that hopefully you've got the right real estate partner that's going to be able to know that zoning for you and your particular area. Of course, some areas are less stringent than others, but usually the rules are there for a reason, right? And you want to follow those rules, but you certainly want to know what you're getting into before you start signing paperwork. You've got to make sure that your space is suited for the procedure that you're going to be doing. We had a doctor a long time ago that owned a practice that was above a pizza place. And I mean, who doesn't love the smell of pizza and garlic and all the wonderful things? But smelling it for 8 hours a day, every day, was too much. And it really ruined the practice, and they ended up having to move because it just could not handle the smell of garlic bread any longer. So some of those things you've got to look at, make sure that your space is going to be suited for the type of practice that you want to do. If you're a vet and down the road you want to offer some boarding or something of that nature, you've got to make sure that you have the real estate to be able to do that. So those are 5 quick tips for a specialist specifically, and how they can make sure that they're hitting the mark when they're looking at opening an office in a particular area. Now, we offer a great discount on all of our reports to our podcast listeners. All you have to do is enter the code podcast 2025, and you'll receive that discount at the checkout on the website. Now, if you have any questions about anything we've gone over today, or looking at placing your next perfect practice, you can visit us on the web at drdemographics.com, or give us a call at 844-704-0499. Of course, you can always reach out to me directly at mike@drdemographics.com. So with that, we will see you on the next episode. We're going to talk a little bit more about referrals a little bit later on. But today, you specialists, I hope you found the perfect place to put your practice. See you next time.